Hello and welcome back to NHB Retro. Today on the show we have a computer that has always been on my wish list and kind of one that I never really expected to acquire, and that is an actual Franklin Ace 100. Now I also own a Franklin Ace 100 motherboard and have owned that for quite some time. I'm really glad I was able to pick that up randomly some years ago. But finally, I was able to pick up one that's in the case. It's not quite complete, but the case is a big part. The motherboard, obviously, the keyboard, which is slightly different than the Ace 1000 and 1200 keyboards, even though they're very, very similar. We'll take a closer look at that. But let's go ahead right now and take a look at the condition that this one's in, and we'll see what things need to get done in order to get it up and running, hopefully. And here we see what I'm going to call most of my Franklin Ace computers. I know that there's one more 1200 in storage, but yeah, other than that, as far as complete in the case with keyboard Franklins, this has been my collection for a while now. Incidentally, check out this 1000 here. Most notably, look at the label. I mean, a regular Ace 1000 looks like that. This one looks like this. Pretty interesting. On the off chance that anyone knows what the deal is there, definitely drop me a line, let me know. I'm super curious about that. It has a pretty interesting motherboard as well. It's just an early rev with the separate color board, but yeah, not sure what to make of that. Interesting. So here we have the Ace 100, pretty much as delivered from the seller, and the seller did an awesome job. I believe he was the actual original owner of the machine, but in any case, he did a really good job of packing it up and getting it to me safe and sound. Let's go ahead and open it. This has a pretty interesting case. Kind of slide it forward, and then you can pick it up and just lift it right off. A little bit nicer than maybe even Apple's solution to that issue. Okay, so here we have the machine, the inside of it. Of course, the most notable things are no power supply, which is not such a big deal. It uses sort of the standard Franklin power supply plug, and I have plenty of options there. It's also missing the ROMs. Everything else is here. It's got 48K of RAM. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the ROMs. Of course, if you've watched this channel before, you may know that I have another Ace 100 motherboard, just the motherboard, which is not 100% functional, but it's pretty close, and most importantly, it has the ROM chips. So we'll be stealing the ROMs out of that one to put into this one to hopefully get it working. This is a Rev A board, incidentally. Let's take a little closer look at the two revisions of the board that I'm aware of and what the differences are. Okay, so here we have the two revisions that I'm aware of the Ace 100 board. I was able to get this nice Rev B revision of the Ace 100 board from the same seller. Feel very fortunate to have found that. This is the other Rev A motherboard that I have. And the first thing you notice when you look at this compared to any sort of Apple II Plus or most of the clones is this extra row of ROM chips here. And I've never seen this populated on any of the boards that I've seen, which admittedly is not that many. There's a provision here for a switch, also not populated, that would let you, when the power's off, switch between two sets of ROMs, which is pretty neat. I suspect that back in 1982, the idea would be to allow you to have your AppleSoft ROMs and integer basic ROMs. Of course, integer basic didn't end up being as important to most people as having AppleSoft and the AutoStart ROM. And so, by the time they got to the Rev B board, they had done away with that extra row of ROM chips and had snuck in an extra row of RAM. So, while this board, very much like the original Apple II and II Plus, had the provision for 48K of RAM, we have an extra 16K here to bring us up to the maximum 64K. And there's a little jumper here that will let you disable that. I suspect it's mapped into the same space as, if you had a language card in slot 0. So if you did have something that you wanted to use in slot 0, you could map that RAM out and be back to just your regular Apple II Plus memory map. But yeah, so I've already taken the ROM chips out of this board, and I will put those into the complete machine, and we will go from there. This board, of course, also is missing the ROM chips. They would have been the same. I would like to try to get this board going at some point too. Yeah, and as well as getting this board back up and running. This board mostly works. There is some problem with addressing the basic ROMs, though. Whenever you run anything in BASIC in this machine, it will crash. Otherwise, it seems to work fine. But anyway, let's get on with looking at the new machine. All right, so temporarily I have an Apple II power supply hooked up using my adapter that I made in a different video. I initially thought that was going to be a fine solution for this going forward, and that it might even fit the case, or at least maybe a Franklin power supply would. But I was not anticipating that this hole is very much off-center from where a normal Apple II or even a Franklin power supply hole would be. So we're going to have to do something a little creative to actually have a more permanent solution than this, but this will work for testing. We've got the ROM chips in there. Incidentally, I did upload these ROM images to archive.org. If you're interested in finding them, that's where they are. And here, I've got the computer plugged into my trusty Apple Monitor 3. So yeah, let's just go ahead and give it a shot. Always turn on the monitor so I don't give myself a heart attack. All right, and now let's power it up. Okay, that is the most familiar beep I've ever heard. And as we can see on the monitor, it has booted up and appears to be working. Now, in full disclosure, when I first got this machine, I tried this and it did not work. But all I have done to it so far is I pulled out each of the RAM chips. I thought maybe I had a RAM issue. I tested all of them. They all tested good. I did, the magic deoxiding of the sockets, put the RAM chips back in, and voila, it boots up into AppleSoft Basic. So yeah, let's see about getting like a more permanent ROM solution going here. And also we're going to have to deal with the keyboard. Now, of course, the keyboard is the usual Franklin Keytronics keyboard. It's actually a little bit different internally than the normal Franklin Ace 1000 keyboards. So I'll get that pulled apart and I'll show you what I mean there. But of course, it does not work. Being a Keytronics keyboard, it's a foam foil pad keyboard, and they have all expired at this point. So that'll be something we have to dig into. I have all the pads for fixing that. I won't make you sit through it. I've done that before. If you're interested, there are other videos on my channel showing that process. I will try to give you a little glimpse of the differences, though, between this keyboard and the standard one. And then we're going to have to come up with some slightly more elegant solution for the power supply. But yeah, so far, very, very promising. Very good stuff. Okay, so let's take a look now, first of all, at the keyboard. And one of the things that I really like about this case is the way that the keyboard is held in there. And it's basically held in by the top lid. Once the lid is off, which just slides off, you can basically just lift the keyboard out and separate it from the actual computer. So with the keyboard out of the case, you can see that one of the differences between this and the later Franklin 1000 series keyboards is the way that the inputs and outputs are connected. We have this little daughter board here, which I think I can just remove. And all of our keyboard inputs are coming in here, and then the outputs for the LED, the front panel LED, and the reset switch are coming into this little daughter board, which makes it pretty handy. Once that is removed, now I can pull the keyboard off just by removing these screws. I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll just real quickly grab a Franklin 1000 Ace 1000 keyboard, and we'll look at the difference. Okay, so here we have the keyboard out of the Ace 100 and a keyboard out of an Ace 1000. And like I pointed out, the output from this keyboard, the character information, the reset, and the power for the LED all comes off this edge connector here onto that daughter board, and goes to the case where the switch and the LED are located. That makes this really easy to just pop off and get full access to the keyboard. This is the one from the 1000. And main difference is there's just a more normal, in terms of an Apple II type socket here, 16 pin going to our, that's all the keyboard information. The key presses go through that to the motherboard. We've got a separate set of wires for the LED over here. And of course, the reset switch on this machine is contained inside the case and wired directly into the reset jumpers on the motherboard, instead of having it all come through the keyboard here. So let's see. I mean, otherwise, they're somewhat similar. You notice the 1000 has, obviously this keyboard was had other applications as well. So there's places for a whole set of additional keys on here, not present on the 100. The layout otherwise is exactly the same, I believe. Yeah. And if we're looking at the backs of them, these are just the adhesive pads for securing the cables down originally. They've long since given up that job. Got some stickers here, FT06, FT03. Yeah. I guess they are actually fairly different. I've never really looked directly at this here, this side of them. This one has the Keytronic information. I assume this is a Keytronic product. I mean, it's very similar type of a layout and everything. But I do not see on the back side here a Keytronic, the actual company information. as you do here. Note the little bodge wire there. Kind of interesting. See if there's any Keytronic information on the front. I mean, they're vastly similar, so I'd be very surprised if this isn't also a Keytronic device. Okay, so the next step is going to be to pull all the keycaps off. The front keyboard, the actual key little standoffs and this plate are held on with the screws from the back, and then the foam and foil pads are underneath here. I've done an entire video on replacing the foam and foil pads on one of this style of keyboard. It'll be exactly the same here, so not too much to see there. If I discover anything super exciting, I'll bring you back. Otherwise, I'm just going to repad this keyboard, and then we'll try it out in the actual machine. All right, so here we have the computer all put back together. And that, I have to admit, did not go quite as I had planned. Having worked on quite a number of these Keytronic keyboards before, I really expected that I would just replace the foil, the foil pads, using the Texelec foil pads, by the way. They're awesome. And then it would just go back together and it would just work. And when I put it back together, it didn't quite do that. And so I was probing around, looking for what the cause might be, and the keyboard just started working. So my suspicion is there's still something potentially like a bad solder joint or something like that. However, right now, all back together, and we can see, let's see here. Whoops, if I could type. It is working. There it is. So yeah, hopefully that continues to work. If the error pops up again and it just stops working, my suspicion will be that I will need to reflow the solder joints or something like that. But I was really fearful that there was something wrong with perhaps the controller chip, or there's a ROM on there as well, a PROM that might have been an issue, but no, it is working. Okay, so from here, let's move on to the issue of the power supply. So here is the plan for the power supply. We basically have this, obviously this space here that the power supply needs to be constrained within. It has to use that plug for the power, and all the access has to happen through that particular hole there. So my plan is to cut an aluminum plate that will screw in to the bottom, possibly with some standoffs. I'm not quite sure yet. I will use this Meanwell power supply, very modern switching power supply. There are the particulars. Now this probably has a little more headroom than would be ideal, but it should work no problem. I'll mount it to the plate somewhere in, like, we'll see exactly where it needs to go, but something like that. And then I'll just wire this switch. The plate will curve up and have a vertical surface here, which is going to be kind of interesting because this surface here is not exactly vertical. It leans out that way, so there will be kind of a, I don't know, an interesting gap there. Should be fine. And short of doing some fabrication that I'm not really qualified to do, making a vertical piece there should be fine, and we'll wire it all in the plug there. So that's the plan. So step one for me is going to be doing some measurements, cutting out that plate and seeing how bending it goes. And here's the progress so far. As you may be able to guess, I'm kind of just winging this. But here's the plate itself. Now I plan to add some reinforcements here to here. Though honestly, that's not springy at all. I think once that's screwed down, well, we'll see if that's necessary. But anyway, we've got the switch and the outlet mounted to the panel. Very nice. I honestly wish that I had, at this point, that I had purchased some aluminum that was a little bit longer. This will go in here like this, which actually looks tight now just because these wires are so incredibly long. Yeah, that'll actually work out pretty well, I think. And then the voltage, the input is on this side, the output is on this side, and it'll mount into the computer like that. Yeah, so all in all, that's coming out, I think, pretty good, and should definitely do the trick. And here is the monstrosity that I have cooked up. I've got the Meanwell power supply mounted here. I've got a nice grounded and fused plug with switch, and I've got a Franklin power connector wired in here. It all turned out pretty nice. I honestly wish I had left myself a little more length here. This will just get the job done, I think. But let's go get it hooked up into the machine and see how it works. And here it is all hooked up to the machine. Once again, I really should have given myself more length on those wires. The +5 in particular is pretty tight. I might just end up relieving that a little bit out of this support here if possible. But anyway, now that it is plugged in and ready to go, let's at least turn it on, see if we get a beep. Okay, machine is on. We got the beep. No fire, no smoke. So let's get it all put back together and hook the monitor up and just give it a test. And so one of the last pieces of the puzzle was to just program some fresh new ROMs, which I've inserted here. The original ones that I had stolen from the other ACE 100 motherboard that I have actually seem kind of marginal. They scanned fine. I mean, I was able to read them. And incidentally, I have backed those up onto the Internet Archive, archive.org, and there'll be a link in the description if you need to make yourself some ROMs. But yeah, that worked out really nicely. I'm really thankful now that I had that other motherboard with the ROMs. It's funny how sometimes the pieces all come together. And so there we have it, the Franklin Ace 100, all back together. Like I mentioned earlier, probably several times, this is one of my absolute unicorn computers. I never thought I would find a complete one. I have had a semi-functional Ace 100 motherboard for some time. You may have seen some videos about that. I've actually done some work on that recently too, and that one seems to be working just fine as well. But this one with the case and with the original keyboard, quite gratifying to actually finally get one of these. So hopefully you enjoyed coming along for the ride. Yeah, it was a fun process. It's always fun when they work. And so yeah, until the next one, that's all I've got.